Okay, I think we're going to start. So thank you everyone for coming to this Pebble developer meetup. After the last one where we celebrated the end of the Kickstarter campaign, we've been very busy actually preparing the product that you'll get to receive in your mailbox very, very soon. Tonight we wanted to go back to our more technical talks and let you find out a lot more information about the timeline. So the timeline is this new concept that we're introducing with Pebble Time. I'm sure you guys have seen it in the video, you've seen it in our little demo that we've done here before. Tonight, Kirby will show you how a developer can integrate into the timeline, what it looks like from a user perspective, what type of apps can use the timeline, and also really get into the code, what APIs are available to use the timeline, what you can do with those APIs, and how we expect you to use them. This is all pretty new, of course. Those APIs have only been available for 2 or 3 weeks, but this is something that you can already try in the emulator, and Kirby will be showing that to you tonight. We'd love to get your feedback, so if you have any question, please save it, ask it, either at the end of the presentation or afterwards when we'll be just chatting around between all of us. And after the presentation, we'll also take a look at some apps that have already been written for Pebble Time. So we have a couple of apps that were and games that were written specifically for Pebble Time that we'll be showing tonight. If you have an app that you've been working on, we have 3 Pebble Times that are over there in the back. We just hello. Is mine working? No. How did you do that? That's not how technology works. Okay, yeah, perfect. This one. So we have 3 Pebble Times that are over there in the back. Chris, can you raise your hand? Okay, so Chris over there, stand up, Chris, so everyone can see you. Chris over there has 3 Pebble Times, 3 iPod Touch, and he's here tonight to let you test your apps. So if you have something you want to test on a real Pebble Time, you can go to him. I see John is already going to steal one of the Pebble Time. He's not going to let go of it. So if you have something you want to test, go talk to Chris, and you can test your app on a real Pebble. At the end of the presentation, we'll look at some demos of apps running on a real Pebble Time. And if you have anything else you want to show, even apps on the actual existing Pebble, we'd love to see that as well. Thank you very much, and without further intro, I'll give the mic to Kirby.
Thank you very much, Mark. You guys hear me?
No.
Not at all. Hey guys, my name is Kirby. I'm a developer evangelist at Pebble, and today I'm going to be talking about Pebble timeline development, as my first slide says. So before we get into actually developing for timeline, I want to ask a question. And the question is, what is timeline? Kind of a funny question to ask at a developer meetup, but behind that question, I think is a really important answer. And the answer is the motivation for why we built timeline. So why did we build timeline? Well, the reason we built timeline is because we're all busy people, right? And we have stuff we care about, information in our apps that is important to us. And since we're busy people, we want to get that information as quickly as possible. So on old operating systems, you have these segmented apps. You want to get to the information you care about, you have to go to the app, you have to drill down through multiple views. This is probably a bad idea. It was working really well, actually. Okay. And you have to drill down through those views to get out to the information you really care about. So timeline takes a different approach to this. Timeline uses context of time to organize the information you really care about. So if you want information that's relevant to your past, you click up on the Pebble. If you want information that's relevant to your future, you click down on your Pebble. So let's go ahead and go through a couple of different examples. Before I get into the actual example here, I want to say that we have multiple layouts for timeline. And before I talk about layouts, I want to talk about pins. So that information that you guys really care about, we encapsulate that to a little nugget of information that we call a pin. So pins exist on your timeline, and there are different layouts for these pins. We have sports pins, we have weather pins, we have generic pins, we have all different kinds of pins. And I encourage you to look at all the different kinds of pins we have at our developer documentation. But this pin right here, the sports pin, let's say I want to look at the game that's already occurred. So I click up my Pebble to look at my past. And here is a pin. When you click on a pin, when you select a pin, you get a more detailed view of what that pin is about. Here's another example. Here's a calendar pin. On the left, you have what it looks like on a person's timeline, and on the right, what it looks like when it's selected. And here is a weather pin as well. That's not very exciting because those are just mock-ups, right? So you guys want to see what it looks like on a real timeline? So today I took my Pebble with my name cat, watch face, and I made a couple videos on what timeline looks like today. I'm going to prefix this with this is what timeline looks like today. So this is not the final version of what timeline should look like for all of us. But if you were to develop from Pebble today on Pebble or using our SDK, this is what you see in the emulator. So here, NamCap is running, and I'm going to click down to see the information about my future. Here I can see that Hobart Wall Cop is a movie that's playing later today, and maybe I'm interested in that, so I'm going to see it now. Of course, I can go up in my timeline to go back up to my NamCap Austin Watchface. And then I can also go up and look at the pins that are relevant to me in my future. So here you can see I have a couple pins. I have a calendar pin that's talking about a meeting that I had today. Then I can scroll up and see that I had a package delivered from Amazon. And I can click on this and see some more relevant information about this pin in its detailed view. So now this is a really, really simple example. I just whipped this up real quick before this demo. So this doesn't have any special pin features. So pins can do lots and lots of things besides just display information. You can actually take action on your pins. So you can create actions within your pins that can then launch the apps that you've created and then do things. So like for example, my Hobart Mall Cop pin, maybe I can purchase a ticket for that movie and go see it later tonight. And of course, I can go back to my timeline, and I think I can even go back to my NamCat watch face. This just shows you what scrolling looks like and what my NamCat watch face looks like.
Question.
Can we actually keep questions to the end? Is that okay? Sorry, but it just makes it more clean that way. So my next question is, why should you guys care about this? And I have 3 answers to that question. Because like, why do you want to build a timeline application when you just build a regular old application? Catherine's telling me to move, so everybody can't see me. So those 3 answers. The first answer is you are never going to be closer to the users of your applications than ever before. The Pebble is a very, very personal device. It sits on everyone's wrist. And now you're not only going to sit on someone's wrist, you're going to sit on their schedule, which is pretty awesome. Something that you can do with pins is push notifications to users. So you can actually say, here's a specific user, I want to push a notification directly to their wrist. It's an incredibly personal interface. This is something, turn an API into a Pebble app. This is something that we get all the time at hackathons. Here's this awesome API that does this and this and this. Why does it keep doing that? Think if I just put it closer? I don't think if I put it closer, it's going to get any better. So I'm just going to talk to you guys. Can't hear me at all? You can't hear me? Awesome. So I actually had a cough this morning, so I'm really glad you guys can still hear me. But at hackathons, all the time we hear, there's this awesome API, how can I turn it into a Pebble app? And you can do that really easily today. But now you can do it orders of magnitude more easily with Timeline. And my final answer to why you guys should care is apps can always be running. So today, if you build a Pebble app and you want it to be doing something, it has to be open for it to be doing something. And the reason that background is in quotation marks is because, I'm going to talk about this later, but the way that you push pins to users is through, this is so much fun, the way that you push pins, to, should I put one on each side? The way that you push pins to users is through the Timeline API. So we have a Timeline web API, you push pins to users through that API. Wow. So not only do you have to have a Pebble app pushing those pins to the API, anything that can talk to the internet, like the server, can push pins to your users. So now let's talk about the project. Now that we kind of have all this awesome context, let's actually build something today. So today we're going to build a movie showtimes app. So specifically, we're going to build an app that will create pins like this and push them to our, stay, the viewer of the webcam, push pins like this to our user's timeline. So timeline makes making pins really, really easy. It's just JSON, which is really, really slick. So we can kind of walk through this here. So every pin, this is like the most basic pin you could ever get. Every pin has to have an ID. It has to be identifiable. It's also really handy if you ever want to update a pin. You can update your user's pins by using their ID. Obviously, every pin has to have a time because that's what we use to place the pins on the timeline. Pins have to have a layout. Like I said, we have all different kinds of layouts that you can check out on our developer documentation. Today, we're just going to use a generic pin. So we're using a generic pin layout. And then we have to have a title, which is the text that is displayed on the timeline. So now that you understand the very smallest thing that we're building today, let's kind of look at the big picture of how everything's going to work together. So there are 3 different ways that you can push pins to your users. This diagram only illustrates one of those ways, and this illustrates what we'll be doing today. So what's not up on the screen is you can push pins to all of your users. I can make a single request to the Pebble API, Pebble Web API, and then all of my users will get that pin. Users can also subscribe to topics. So they can subscribe to like action movies, for example. And then you can push a single pin to that topic, and everyone who's subscribed to that topic will see that pin. And then finally, what we're doing today and what is displayed on the screen is you can push a pin to a single user. So here we have the cloud, obviously. Here we have someone's phone running a JavaScript application, and here we have a person's timeline. So we run JavaScript that talks to the Pebble timeline API, and then that's going to sync pins down to that person's phone, and then we push to that person's timeline. Pretty straightforward. And before we get into coding, I would remind everyone that you should look at our developer documentation. When I was building this demo, I had no idea what I was doing. So what I do, I went on to our developer documentation at developer.getpebble.com. So if I am able to figure out how to make a demo for a timeline, I'm very confident that you can. I'm also wondering right now how I'm going to start typing with both hands while I'm recording this microphone. So Tamar, can you go over here and keep touching me?
Hello.
And then this one works. It's like weird magic. You just have to believe, I guess. The demo gods. What are the demo gods? So we're going to go to Cloud Pebble. Cloud Pebble is the official online IDE for developing for the Pebble. Today we're going to create a new project. Can you guys see this okay? I made my font as big as humanly possible. Oh, also, let me do this. Bam. And now I should be able to see where I click. Awesome. Cool. So we're going to call this app Showtimes. We're going to use the CSDK, and we're going to use SDK 3, which supports Pebble Time and the timeline. We're going to create a super minimal application. We're just going to pretend that this is a pre-existing movie Showtime application, but today we're just going to focus on purely the JavaScript side. We're not going to be writing any C code today. We're going to just be writing JavaScript that talks to some APIs to push pins to people's Pebbles. And we'll create the app. So before we get into actually writing code to create the app, I want to show you this really cool tool that Cloud Pebble has. So there's this thing right here that says Timeline Preview. When you click on this, you'll see that you can type the JSON in manually and create pins and play with pins. So we'll do that right now. Also, I have a text expander on my computer right now. So don't think this is like some magical Cloud Pebble wizardry, because it's not. So here we have a pin. That's magic, right? So here we have this pin. It has an ID, it has a time, it's using the generic layout. Let's go ahead and insert this pin and see what happens. As soon as you insert the pin, the Pebble emulator is booted up. This is a full-blown emulator that emulates the Pebble hardware and runs a full version of the Pebble operating system. And now, if we scroll up, you'll see that this is cool. I'm gonna make this a little bigger so you can see. So I wanted you to see something real quick and point something out. See this string that represents the date time? You'll see that it says 2100 hours and 15 minutes. And then there's a Z. That Z is for Zulu. So we require that your date time be an ISO string, ISO standard date time string. So here in California, we're on daylight savings right now. So we are 7 hours behind Zulu time. So you just take that 21 minus 7, and you'll see that that's why I had to press up to see that pin. We can play with this pin right here in Cloud Pebble. I can say this is awesome. I click insert pin, and now it says this is awesome. Of course, we can also change the time. So we'll put it in tomorrow, and we'll say like 4 a.m., which minus 7 should be math. What is it? 9:15, yay. Okay, cool. And we can also just decrement this until we see the cool little X minutes till. So 16 minutes till, this is awesome. Pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and delete this pin so our timeline is clean for while we build this application. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna need some JavaScript. So let's go ahead and create a JavaScript file. We're gonna call it app.js. Click create. And with all JavaScript applications, you're gonna need a ready event listener. So T-ready, cool. This is very analogous to document.ready on, I don't have them key bindings. Super cool pro tip. In Cloud Pebble, I'm gonna leave the page, it'll probably disappear. You can turn on Vim key bindings, which is super duper handy if you are a Vimmer like I am. Cool, app.js, and there's nothing there. Cool. So now I can go to the top of the page by hitting GG. So in this app event listener, basically what this means is as soon as the JavaScripts are ready, this callback will get called, and then we can do whatever we want. So in this case, we're calling a method called getShowTimes. What this method is going to do is it's going to talk to a pre-existing Showtime API, and then from there, we're going to take the API, pick out the key pieces of information we care about. We'll use those key pieces of information to formulate a pin that we'll eventually put on our person's timeline. We'll push that pin to the timeline web API. We'll then push that pin to our user's Pebble. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get started with getShowTimes. So here we have getShowTimes. You'll see that we create a HTTP request. It's a get request, and we have this super long URL. Let's see what this URL goes to. So I'm going to zoom in here so you can see what's going on. So I found this API. It's really random name, but it takes a date, which I showed today, takes a zip code, so I put our zip code, and then the API key. And what it gives us is a huge JSON object that represents all the movies that are playing today. So you can see here is an array of movies. We have, the title of the movie is 5 to 7. You can scroll down and see that we have some showtimes, which are what we care about. It's an array of showtimes, which has the theater, and then what we really care about, which is the date time string. So that's what we're going to get when we make this request. So as soon as we get this request, we'll get a response, and handle showtime will get called. So let's go ahead and handle the showtime and pick out those key pieces of information that we really care about. Nope. There it is. Cool. So handle showtimes, what it does is it takes that JSON object and, well, it's actually just a JSON string. So the first thing we have to do is turn that into a JavaScript object. So we say this.responseText, our string. We use JavaScript's JSON class, which has this parse function that will then turn it into a JavaScript object, which we store in movies. And then we get the movie that we care about. I picked the 4th or the 5th movie because it has showtimes that are in the future for today. So that's why I'm saying 4, and that's why I'm saying 6. right here. So we get the ID, we get the title, and we get the showtime. So why do we get the ID of this movie? Like, why are we getting this super random MV00 blah, 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 blah? Well, the reason is because timeline pins require an ID. I don't have a great way to generate some random ID, but this API already has an ID referring to this movie. So I'm just going to use the ID that they use. I'm going to get the title, and then I'm going to get the showtime I care about. Now back to time zone magic. So not magic, but time zones. So like I said, we require an ISO date time string. So we need to get the offset of the date. And the reason that is because this API is really, really smart. This API knows I'm in California. And so the date time strings it gives me are for Pacific Daylight Time. But that's not what the Timeline Web API wants. The Timeline Web API wants that ISO date time string. So we have to get an offset. So when you do date.get time zone offset, that gives you the time zone offset in minutes, but we need it to be in milliseconds. So we do times 60 to get us down to seconds, times 1,000 to get us down to milliseconds. And the reason we need milliseconds is because when we take this date time string right here, date.parse is going to return milliseconds. So we just add those milliseconds since we are behind Zulu time. We're going to add those 7 hours worth of milliseconds. And then JavaScript has a super, super awesome toISO string function. So you just basically plug in the information we care about, the show ID, plug in the date time string, plug in our title, and we say it's a generic pin. And then we go ahead and call and pass in a method. We pass in our pin to a method called insert pin. Insert pin is going to make that request to the Timeline Web API. So let's go ahead and do that. What did I just do? That is not good. Sorry, the demo gods have not been with us today. So we have handle showtime, and now we're going to do insert pin. Awesome. So the first thing we do is create a variable that references the Timeline Web API URL, timeline-api.getpebble.com. Pretty clever. And then we go ahead and create the insert pin function. So we make a request object. So like I said, there are 3 different ways to push pins to our users. Since we're pushing a pin to a specific user, not to everyone or to a topic, but to a specific user, it has to be a put request. So we say that's a put request. And then we finish off our endpoint with our pin ID. And then we really don't care that much about the response. We're just making a request to the server. We want to make sure that the request got there, so we're just going to log out wherever the response is. And now we get to something interesting. So I need to be able to identify that user. So we identify the user with a timeline token. So there's a class called Pebble, a function called getTimelineToken, which will then call this callback and pass in the token, which we can then set as a header on our request. So we say set request header user token, and we also need to, of course, tell the API that we're speaking in JSON. This pin object is currently a JavaScript object. We need it to be a string. So the opposite of JSON.parse is JSON.stringify. We'll turn our JavaScript object into a string, and that's what we send in our request. And then this should send the pin. So when I click this play button, it'll boot the emulator, compile this code, and hopefully that pin will get pushed. But I can tell you a little secret. This pin is not going to get pushed to the timeline. And I'll explain why in a second. So why this is booting up and compiling and stuff, I want to ask the audience, how many of you guys have built a Pebble app before? Raise your hand. Awesome. Raise your hand if you built a Pebble timeline app before. Tama and Chris. Okay, 2 Pebble employees. You guys can build timeline apps on the emulator right now. I'm doing it right now. So I encourage you to do so. So I'm going to dismiss the logs for now. Here's our blank app that we're going to pretend is already a movie showtime app. And then if I look on my timeline, I have no pins. So let's look at the logs. We'll go to compilation, look at the app logs, and we'll see that error, timeline token, no available token for this app or user. So the Timeline API doesn't know about us. They don't know about our app at all. So we have to tell the Timeline API about us. And how we do that is by downloading our PBW and then going to the dev portal, dev-portal.getpebble.com. I'll make this huge. Excuse me. I'll go to the dashboard and I'll create a watch app. Create watch app. There's a whole bunch of fields here. The only two that matter for right now while you're building this timeline application are the first two. So we'll say showtime. Showtimes, I believe, are plural. And we'll say get the showtimes on your Pebble timeline. Awesome. Go all the way down to the bottom, click create, and from here, we now need to upload our PBW. So we don't actually need the whole PBW, or the dev portal doesn't need the whole PBW. All it really cares about is the UUID, which is the unique identifying ID for our app, but it gets that through the PBW. So we're gonna add a release. Here I can just drag and drop my PBW. It will upload it. I'll click save. And now, when I refresh the page, we'll see enable timeline. We'll go ahead and enable the timeline. And now, if we go back here, and I just open the app again, because everything should be working, it's just gonna make that request again. I should now be able to go to our logs, not the build logs. I wanna go to the app logs. Nope. App logs. And we should see that the pin is sent and we get a response. So now if I go down, there we go. Why We're Young, which is playing at 9:20 p.m.
Are you going to document that process, what you just did?
Absolutely. This is all being recorded right now, so you guys can all look at this later. Go back to my slides. Cool. So to wrap up, I just want to recap everything we did. So we learned how pins are made. They're JSON. We learned about the components they have, and we talked about the different layouts that exist for pins currently. We then learned about the timeline API and how you can then take that JSON and send it to the API, and then ultimately how that will be pushed to a user's timeline. So a couple caveats. Right now, the iOS SDK does not support timeline. Currently, the only way you can do this is through the JavaScript SDK. JavaScript SDK works on all phones everywhere, so that's awesome. So many applications you can use for this. I also want to emphasize that anything that can connect to the internet can talk to people's timelines. So even though we built a Pebble app that does this, you could just as easily build a web server written in Node that does this. And actually, we already have an NPM module that talks to the timeline API. It makes it super, super easy to push pins to the timeline API. Thank you, Neil.
What's that? What's the NPM module called?
The NPM module is called Pebble-API. So NPM install Pebble-API. So shameless plug, we are hiring like crazy at Pebble. We're especially hiring people who are very passionate about Pebble. So you guys are here, so speaking to you. So check out our job listings, please. And thank you. If you have any questions, I'm sure you do. Alex.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. Where does the...
Oh, cool. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you. So where does Pebble.js actually run again? You said it runs on all phones, but how does it actually...
So like my phone has a Chrome browser, right? Or it has Safari, it has everything. And we have the V8 runtime on my phone. So we utilize the V8 runtime. We run JavaScript on your phone just like any web page or run JavaScript on your phone.
So the JavaScript
inside the Pebble app.
Yeah.
Correct. The Pebble app itself is running. Okay. Pebble app itself is running that JavaScript. Moving from Alex to Alec.
Thanks for Steve. So getting back to the authorization issue, so you sent the authorization system sending a copy of your image to you guys.
The dev portal, yeah.
The portal picks up some kind of identifier.
Correct.
It's been constructed when that image was built. And
actually, it's not when the image is built. You actually specify your UUID. Cloud Pebble does that for you automatically. It just generates a UID. If you use the CSCK and do Pebble new project, it will also do the same thing.
Okay, I mean, that doesn't sound really tight with respect to.
Say again?
Can others register with the same UID? What would their
Unlikely.
What would happen if that happened? Great question. I'm glad you
Great
asked.
question. So no, this cannot happen because once you've uploaded it, you reserve that UUID for yourself, and no one else can actually reserve that UUID. That's why we ask you to upload your app so that you reserve that UUID and no one else can use it.
So get there first.
Yeah, it's a 128-bit number, so there's a pretty wide space of possibility. And because it's generated randomly, there's very low chance of
That's good.
yes, right there. Okay.
So if we develop cool apps with Pebble, what are the odds that Apple will actually let us ship them?
You know, you raise a great point.
So the chances are pretty good. I think John is referring to a post from this morning on the Pebble forums where some developers, a developer from the CNAP app was reporting that he was having problem getting his app submitted to Apple. So we've talked to a number of developers after seeing this message. There are multiple apps that have been approved this week with the Pebble word inside their description. We're talking with the app review team. It's very likely that someone was being a little bit overzealous. So we're working with them to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But you can still submit your app with the Pebble word inside the description. Keeper was updated on Monday, also at Pebble inside the description. So it's really an isolated case as far as we can tell.
Thank you for your question.
I just have a comment on that. Many of us in the room are mostly developing Watch apps that are independent of a stable environment, iOS or Android, so we're not affected by that. If you're developing a simple watch face or game on Pebble and you're putting it up into the Pebble watch face app store, you won't face any kind of barrier from either Apple or Android.
Thanks, Eric.
I was wondering, does the timeline actually require that you have an internet connection to have things pushed?
So, yes, you have to have an internet connection, but at the same time, we have a queuing system so that whenever, like, let's say I push a pin to my timeline, to my own Pebble time, and I currently don't have an internet connection. Maybe I'm on a flight, here. I just flew here today. As soon as I get internet connection, then that pin will be pushed to my timeline.
To get these timelines and notifications sent to their watches, do the services have to be specific for Pebble to send those notifications out, or is it just regular JSON service, or how do you get those notifications?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question. Do you understand your question, Tom?
How do you push the notifications all the way down to the watch so it appears as a
So just like the pin we made today, pins themselves can have notifications in them. It's just like it's a JSON object within the pin JSON object. I can actually show you.
I guess what I was asking about is like these third-party web server API platforms that provide all these different services. Can we create like timeline or apps for their API specifically? It could be in Nintendo service, I guess. If you want us to do that.
Yeah. So
For one, and not for multiple applications.
so I think your question you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is can we take any app or service and push notifications to people's Pebbles?
Yeah.
So like can one push, like one request to the timeline API push multiple notifications?
Yeah.
Not currently.
I guess so you have to do multiple requests or.
Yeah, so if you wanted to have multiple notifications, like this notifications for this app, this notification for this app, there's gonna be separate requests.
Okay. Would that be an issue, like if you're in a scale, I don't know, start different?
I don't think so. We have a great web team.
So I have two questions. The first is, how far back does this go once it's been pushed? What's the history like and the future view? How far does it go?
So currently, I believe it's 24 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas. Both in the past and in the future.
So we're still tweaking that. Right now, you get 48 hours in the past, 24 hours in the future. This might still change before we launch. We're still figuring out what is the most convenient.
The second question I have is, let's say I know that I have an upcoming flight, but I don't want to get it buried. Let's say I'm using lots of apps that want to push pins to my timeline. But I know my flight information is way down there.
Priority.
Depths of tomorrow. Is there any way to kind of pin a pin to close to now?
Not currently, but I think that's an awesome idea. We got some people out there, and then we'll move back.
To use Pebble API to push pins, do I still need like a shell of an application installed on the Pebble watch, or is there like going to be like a certain way of registering, like
Sure.
your node application?
Yeah. So it depends. So you're going to need to have an application because you're going to need a UUID, but you could actually create an application for the Pebble and then hide it from someone's menu. So they can install something and then it doesn't show up at all. Remember when we went to the app message info? So if you look in here, here's the app message info, like where we have the name of our app, my email, the label, everything like that. On a Cloud Pebble, you cannot set that key value, but on the CSDK you can. You can edit the app info.json, and there's this field called .hidden app. And you set that to true.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
And just to be clear, this will be available in Cloud Pebble too. We just have not added that key there.
We've been kind of busy. Come on, right up here. Right here.
I come from the macro world, so I'm just wondering, regarding memory, how are you going to keep up with the back, keeping the apps working in the background for the memory consumption?
The apps themselves.
Can you repeat the question?
So I think the question was what's the concern about memory concerning how many apps you have in the Pebble? Okay. Yeah, running in the background. So Pebble apps don't run in the background. There are background workers, so specific apps have the ability to run really small tasks in the background. Like for example, like a pedometer. You can measure accelerometer data on a periodic basis. But most apps / all apps, as soon as you close the app isn't running anymore. And as far as the concern of actual memory on the Pebble, the new Pebble time is going to have unlimited apps. So you basically select which apps are currently on your Pebble, and then if I scroll to one that isn't currently loaded on my Pebble, I click it, and then it gets beamed from my phone to my Pebble. Does that answer your question? I answered 2 questions there. One wasn't actually asked.
The second one is, how are you going to manage people sending through the timeline? Just, I'm here, and then I'm going to push right
So
now.
like, let's say like if I was a malicious developer, I just send a whole bunch of pins to someone.
Yeah, so it can be every time they scroll down.
So there are multiple solutions. One of them is there's rate limiting on the API, so you cannot push millions of pins to the same user. You'll be blocked by the API. Each pin has a system option that is available on all the pins that is called mute app. And so if the user selects mute app, they will not see any pin or notification from this app anymore. And then they have to go in the mobile app, and in the mobile app, they can re-enable them app per app. So it's an option in the app. So that's how we protect users from getting spammed by an app that they might install without realizing how many pins they're going to get. Okay, sorry.
Can you add the custom fields in the pin you send to the timeline?
Can you add like custom key?
Like if I want to add something new, rather than just the date, pin ID, title.
So I don't think our web API will reject that pin if you add extra fields. The request will still go through, but I don't know what you'd be doing with those extra key values. Like, why do you want extra key values that the timeline API doesn't know about? Because the timeline web API only knows about key values that we put in our documentation.
You can, you said you can program the watch to add different differently on a pin or on another? Once you're in the timeline, you said you can select and is a,
Is he talking about actions?
yeah.
Actions, okay. So, yeah, so like let's say I have a pin, I go into the more detailed view, and then I have several different actions that I want to perform. So you can have several different actions, and how that works is there's a thing called app launch code. So when your app is launched, a code is set on the Pebble saying this app was launched from quick launch, or this app was launched from wherever. So when you set a action, you have a specific ID that you're saying, this is how this app was launched from this specific ID that was set in the timeline detailed view. And then from there in your C app, you say, okay, number 15, I'm going to now buy movie tickets. Or this is number 47, so now I'm going to cancel my movie ticket I just bought. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I'll check. Maybe I can replace it.
So I think maybe just to complete on that answer, maybe we could show the timeline documentation, because if you want to add more information in the pin and make it visible to the user, there are actually different layouts. Layouts have different fields. We've only covered very, very basic, the title today, but all the other pins that Kirby showed at the beginning of the presentation are things that you can do with the timeline API. So you can choose a different layout. You can set an icon on the pin. You can set a lot more text in the content of the pin. And if you want to pass custom information to your app, and I think that was your question, you can pass a UINT32, so 32-bit integer to your app, and that's how you can reference a specific pin that your app will know how to process.
I have two questions actually. When you showed the generic app running on the emulator, there was an envelope that animated over top to the corner. Is that in that pin app, or is that a feature that's universal, like when we create our own?
That's a feature that's universal in pins.
So
that icon will move. Yeah, see, we know it's the same icon here. We know it's going to end up here. We animate it.
Okay, great. And then the other question is, so if a service wants to send these notifications out, a publisher has some information. So the user flow would be they have to go install that publisher's app, right? And then the publisher has a facility to send sort of mass things to everybody who's interested, but they have to go through the web API to submit that. It wasn't obvious how you actually direct things to specific people, like to only those who are registered an interest in that service. That information.
Yeah, so I didn't go over topics today. So in the documentation, you can subscribe to different topics. And I think I want to look at subscribing to the timeline. So when you subscribe to a topic in JavaScript, you would say timeline or pebble.timeline subscribe a topic. And then your website, like here it says a topic, literally a topic. Then when you make your request, you say a topic. And then that pin would get out to all the people that subscribe to a topic.
Every watch owner who subscribed to that topic, your server would then push it up.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And if you want to push to a specific user, you need to get the timeline token, which Kirby showed, send that to your server, and then use that to push to a specific user. So you can really do it. I think we're going to take 2 more questions.
Yeah, so Kirby, the pins that I push out from my service, do they hit my app's local JS so I can look at them before they hit the Pebble itself? You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. So yes, there are times they hit the phone's JavaScript runtime. I don't think we don't have a method right now to call a callback when that happens.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the earlier question about being able to push pins beyond 24 hours, perhaps, or even without an internet connection, you can push batch the pins while you still have it, and then cache it in local storage, JavaScript, and then from JavaScript push this onto the.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
One last question?
No last question?
That's fine. Well, we love the others.
So basic question. So pins only have a single time in them? You have a time range or a set time range?
So,
My airplane trip is unfortunate.
So pins have a time, then pins also can have a duration. So if you look at the time, nope, I want to look at understanding the timeline pin. They have a duration, which is an integer. So you can make the pin disappear after a certain amount of time. What do you think it wants? Like, look at it. He really wants it.
I'm sorry, real quick, I don't know if you covered this, but let's say you change your calendar event and I want to push deletion of the server to the timeline. Is that possible?
Yeah, so just like how we were able to insert and delete pins in that little playground, like this little playground right here, similarly, you can do the exact same thing.
And it's possible to find that as well, but it's just something to help.
Yep. You just drill into that detail view and then click delete, and then.
Okay, thank you everyone. And thank you, Kirby. So as we said, we'll make the presentation available on our website. That's why we wanted to record it today. We'd like to give you the opportunity to show your apps. So we're going to do the same format that we've done many times now. That works really well. If you want to just come here and line up with the apps that you want to show, and we're going to set up the little Pebble camera, and we're going to time those little presentations. What did you say? 2 minutes per person maximum. So if you want to come up and show what you've been working on, I think it's a great opportunity to share it with other people, find other people who might be interested in working on that with you, and get some feedback.
So first, I have a couple of people that signed up to give talks, so I would love it if Andrew and Oslo came up, if they are around. Yes, they are. So I'm going to give you this mic, and you have the camera if you want to show off the actual app down there.
I'll wave my arms around right here when you have to stop.
Hi guys, my name is Andrew. So basically, my problem was, as many people probably were here, is that I had a Pebble and I had many events in the Google Calendar, basically in my calendar, and there was no good way until Pebble timeline appeared to see at least upcoming events on the Pebble. So we created a very basic and simple app, which we call a My Calendar. It allows you without any assistant app, connect your Google Calendar and see 3 upcoming events on your Pebble. Basically, you see the time, you see very nice and small graphic notification that is start soon, and that's it. Very simple, very basic. That's the notification coming, not from the app. So yeah, we had plans to go into a timeline until we discovered that the timeline will have it integrated. But anyway, we would like any of your feedback. Find us on the store. It's My Calendar again. Nice and simple, easy if you're using Google Calendar. Thank you.
Is Chris okay here tonight? No? Okay. How about Alex? You want to come up?
Yeah. I got so many devices. I'm gonna show the companion app here. So about a year ago, I started working on a project called Magnet for people in long distance relationships. Magnet was a bracelet that when you tap on it, well, when I tap on my magnet, my girlfriend Susie feels it vibrate and light up in the same pattern. She's in Boston, so when I visited Mumbai, India, I tapped the magnet. She knew I got there safely, and when she had a job interview, she was really anxious about it. Tap the magnet. She knew I was there for her. Recently, I discovered the Pebble community and how beautiful it is. So a lot of the apps that you guys have created are really inspiring to me. The dev frameworks and documentations are really well done. It's very impressive work. And now the Pebble time is also very beautiful. So I'm introducing a magnet app on Pebble and Pebble time also. So when I tap on my Pebble, my girlfriend feels it vibrating the same pattern. The Magnet app is available as a watch face on the Pebble App Store right now. And the app is going to the iOS App Store next week as well. It also allows your boo to just tap on the phone. So even if they don't have a Pebble, they can just knock on their phone to respond. And it's kind of fun inside. I'm going to bring this interface to the Pebble, but when I tap on this, it becomes less pixelated. And when she taps, it becomes more pixelated. Sort of a tug of war inside of that. It's going to be very pretty on the Pebble time. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
That's really cool. All right, and then John, did you sign up? John, Brewer. Where you at? Hey, Mark.
Right.
Here you are. You know the mic? You got it?
Yeah, let's see. Okay. So, some of you know me as the maker of Wrist Vision, the streaming video app for the Pebble. So obviously when color came out, I got to see what I could do with that. And is that actually all visible? So let's see. So let's point at something purple here.
I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger.
Okay, fair enough.
That's so cool. So if I just stand in front of it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So you can
Wow.
yeah, it turns out it really likes my face because I'm all pink and white and orange. So lots of different contrasting colors. You can see.
It looks like an easy picture.
Yeah, back to the 8-bit world. So basically what I did, I was using 3 bits of grayscale before, and now I'm using 1 bit each of R, G, and B. And
wow, I love the aesthetic of it.
Yeah, this is what you get now. I mean, obviously, my understanding is that the Pebble engineers are working on a later release of increasing the amount of bandwidth available to us. And this is just literally what I did on the train up here today, was getting the color stuff. So it'll get better. But you're seeing tonight was the first time I've ever Wrist Vision in color. Is the blue in the background coming in over there?
Oh yeah, I see
Let's do this guy with the tie-dye shirt. Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
We got some blue and some yellow.
What's your Twitter? Improv nerd.
Improv nerd.
And that's it. I'd like to thank the folks in the back for letting me borrow both an iPod Touch and a watch, which I assume I get to keep now.
Yeah.
That was awesome. All right, so who wants to come down with that from Pebble? Because I know there's 3 or 4 people. Matthew, you want to come up?
I didn't know.
Okay.
So Lee and I both work for Pebble. Once a month we do an internal hackathon at Pebble. We just stay late, have some pizza, some beer, and we just do some fun stuff. So I'm just going to show off a couple of my apps and a couple of other apps the group has made. So the first one is just an analog watch face that has the color table and a kind of cool transparent anti-lace watch. You combine that with
infinite apps, literally.
So I've got a spirograph generator here that does it algorithmically. We put the 2 together, we did, and algorithmic watch face. And then about a year ago, one of our hack nights, I made a new shell for Pebble that just uses grayscale, and I quick updated it to be in color. We do these are actually maker files, they're STL files. We switch over wireframe mode, just put it around. And the only reason this one's a little bit slow is right now it's doing lighting. When you disable the lighting, just like we do in wireframe, it's a lot faster. And then the fun thing was that one of our hack nights, right when we got color API set up, I I got to be the first one to make a Pebble active color. It's just this little, it's on our What's New 3.0 SDK examples. It's basically a little camera that catches fruit and it's supposed to click on stuff. And you did. Cool. Yeah.
So I just wanted to show off a color racing game that I've been working on. So you just hit this button, it'll select what level you want to do. Right now it's only 2, but then you can select which color card you want. Go with red. Start the race. And you're on. Oops. Oh, a little hard to play that way. How are you, Mark? So, yeah, so hopefully put this on the App Store when the time comes. Yeah.
And then you couldn't make it today, but one of our interns, Jupiter, was working with me on making Nyan Cat wash case. You've seen the original prototype. This one has all the cats. So every time you flick it. Mario cats. Taco cat. What is it? Psychedelic cat. But it's a Game Boy cat. But the cool thing is that we showed our the Nyan Cat watch face on some of our videos, and the guy who makes Nyan Cat saw it. It's like, oh, I've got a Nyan Cat watch face in Pebble, and it's going to be official, I guess. So he actually endorses our app after seeing it on the website, and we told him and all the rest of the cats. He's pretty excited. So thanks.
Would anyone else like to demo their app? Or talk about anything that they're planning on working on? Do you have an idea and you want help making it? Anything? Okay, cool. There's always next time. I know that we threw up the jobs website up a little bit earlier. We actually have 2 guys from Pebble. If you want to stand up in the back, wave your hands. We have Mike and Ben who are here. So if you want to talk to them about jobs we have available or would like to work at Pebble, ask them, ask any of us. Just wanted to make that little plug. But we still have lots of drinks. Alcoholic and non-alcoholic, so surely drink them. They're in the back. And other than that, does everybody have their raffle tickets? Yes? Okay. So I'm going to take like a 5-minute break, go to the bathroom really fast, and then we'll do the raffle, which is for a pair of Maker Fair tickets or a sweatshirt, depending on what you're interested in. And we have Friday Maker Fair tickets, which are closed to the public, but you can get them if you win, which is exciting. Or Saturday Sunday tickets are available as well. So give me like 5 minutes, go to the bathroom, come up to your grab a drink, and then meet back here and we'll do the raffle.
Hold the red one. The red one.
So let me show you the easiest thing to do first of all. And this is a demo. But the point is because it mentions this is the demo video. So this is the app. You see the way so what it's doing is it's assuming that there's a it's showing that the end of this yeah, but it's so this is a bit silly because obviously you know it does the Pebble time as well. But it was 7 days waiting for review, which is normal, and then between 10 days in review, and between emails back and forth, and they keep on saying, oh, it's due to unexpected circumstances. So I called them today, and they said, oh, we'll probably get back to you soon. The only thing I can think of is because it mentions Pebble.
So they asked us
Well, I even asked in my email, I said, if you're worried about the images and site generation, if they're too similar, like for the Apple one, I had to actually make it just an outline because they didn't want me using something that was too recognizable as an Apple Watch. So it's very silly. So I was going to.
But it's interesting. So it's hard for us to say anything.
I know. So
we're making a list of the actual tickets and also the actual. So far, we have 3 items that were taken. Only one was security listed like that, and the 2 others were breaching other rules. Like they had screenshots of they had a screenshot of their app and a Pebble sitting next to it. Like it was not a real screenshot. And I thought they were not authorized. They were checking that. The only one that we know was so let us know.
I will do
you
it.
Could give me your information.
Sure, yeah. I don't do you want me just to type it in for you? Because it's awkward to spell out. But yeah, the reason I haven't got in contact with you guys, I actually live just right up from the office, is that because I hadn't firmware from them yet, but it's pretty obvious. The code differences between this and the Apple Watch one is less than 100 times. Like there's image assets that are different, and it could be that they think I'm infringing on your copyrights. And I can simplify them or work with you guys to do it. But I thought they were sufficiently abstract. And I looked at your site as well, and it didn't say anything about restrictions on likenesses of Pebbles. So I thought it was safe, and I didn't want to bother you.
We're
prizes.
Okay, so okay. I've just about everything, but let's just do
Well, unfortunately, none of you can win, so our time is drawn to a close. I hope you enjoyed the demos and everything about timeline, and we'll see you again next month. Bye-bye!
There you go.